What is the key to high performance? If we think back to those Energizer Bunny commercials, you know, the ones that keep going and going and going. Well, on today's episode, what we're going to do is we're going to explore the energy conundrum that we all have in our businesses. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Grow with Tim podcast. I'm JDew.
And I'm Tim Joyner.
And we have a book report of sorts to do. Tim gave me some homework over the course of the last recording and now. And Tim, why don't you talk a little bit about what the book was and why you thought I needed to read this and what we needed to talk about?
Yeah, well, it wasn't targeted for you, first of all. I think you do a pretty good job of managing your energy. But the book is called The Power of Full Engagement. I don't even know how to pronounce his last name. Lair, I think.
I
Jim
think it's
Lair.
Lair. Well, I listened to it just a second ago on Audible, so we could say it right.
Okay,
and Mr. Jim, if you're out there, we think it's Lohr.
Jim Lohr and Tony Schwartz. I'm pretty sure about the Schwartz part.
Yeah.
So Tony Schwartz, Jim Lohr, The Power of Full Engagement. In this book, Jeremiah, first of all, I'll just say I very rarely read the same book twice. I read a lot, but I very rarely read a book twice. I've read this book 4 times.
4 times.
So
yes.
Over the last 10 years or so,
right.
including just a couple times recently. And I think it has challenged my thinking in more ways than just about any other book, short of maybe the Bible, has. A couple other books up there with it. But anyway, I just think it's got so much good stuff that is not common wisdom but should be. And I think it's applicable to almost everybody. And so I thought it would be, I think a lot of our listeners will really benefit from this book. So that's why I gave it to you now, because I thought you needed it.
Well, I did need it, Tim. I did need it. And, of course, like you said, common sense is becoming not so common, I think, in our fast-paced world. And really the reason for that is the load and level of our responsibility seems to change.
Yeah.
All of us
not
who
just change generically, but get bigger, right?
Get bigger,
just grows.
right.
Yeah.
And because of that, I think all of us, as we know that we're getting older each and every day, and those responsibilities change and they get bigger and they grow, that we need to figure out ways to stay on top of our game.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's really what this was talking about, I think.
Yeah, it was. So, I mean, I think a central tenet of life, at least for our listenership, the people that we run with, right, our responsibilities, our demands, the demands placed on us keep getting bigger, right? And that's kind of hard to imagine. I remember thinking in high school, like I was running a couple of businesses, and I felt like I had a lot of responsibility. And like, how am I going to keep? Well, I mean, that was child's play, literally child's play, right?
Okay.
But then I got to college, and you probably felt the same way. Like you were involved in
we were both very involved in college programs, from literary society things to literal programs for me, you know, on stage and things like that. And, of course, the load of schoolwork.
Yeah, load of schoolwork. I was involved in intercollegiate debate. And there was a bunch of stuff going on, and I felt like, man, I've got a lot of demands placed on me. How am I going to get all this stuff done, right? Well, again,
now, for me, I must say, I'll throw in a caveat here. Part of the reason that I decided after school that I wasn't going to make a resume and get a job is I didn't want any more responsibilities. I thought, this is as hard as I can possibly work.
You poor naive soul.
And I said, I'm not doing it anymore. So I actually didn't go get a job. I was like, I just need a break.
Right. How'd that work out for you?
Well, 7 months of being broke-ish as far as I could go.
But still all the responsibility you could handle, probably.
It was 100%. Yeah.
So I thought that, you know, okay, I've peaked now in terms of the demands placed upon me.
Exactly.
Then I started businesses, and then I started hiring employees, and lo and behold, the responsibilities kept getting bigger. And then, you know, I had kids, and one kid, and that's a lot of work, and then 2 kids, and then 3 kids, and like the responsibilities keep getting bigger. And I have every bit of confidence that as our businesses continue to expand, we've just started a new business recently.
Right.
I've got other businesses that are in various stages of development, some mature, some not so mature. The load is going to keep getting bigger. And I think for most of the people listening, unless you're like in retirement or you've got some cushy retirement job, your burdens have kept getting bigger, right?
Right.
I think that's fair to say.
I think for 99% of people, that's what it is. I did spend some time in network marketing, and there were those top 1.1 20 percenters of the 20 percenters of the 20 percenters who claim that their responsibilities actually went down.
But they
that
also
was
are
never
selling
me.
something,
That
so
wasn't
you
me.
never know whether to believe them, right?
Well, they did have to give a great speech every quarter, but there's a certain level of passive residual that has eluded me still up to this point. Now, here's a question I have for you before we get into it. We have a different set, I believe. Well, I'll qualify it as a different timeline when it came to family responsibilities, because I did not get married until I was 29 and a half or so, something like that. How old were you when you got married? And your wife worked in your companies for several years.
Yeah.
Yes?
So I should know this. I don't actually remember if I was 22 or 23. I think I was. I don't know. I'd have to go back and do that math.
Well, it's easy for me to remember because we had our first
23.
baby at 30, so I just back up one. It's easier to remember an even number.
I was in my early 20s. How about
early
that?
20s? Okay, yes.
And then we adopted our first son when he was 7. We'd been married for 8 years at that point, I think. Yes. And so I've had growing responsibility.
Well, yes. Now my kids in the last 8 years are now 8 down, and there are 4 of them, and so adding the family after I started the entrepreneurial journey I was not prepared. I was not prepared. I'll just admit that. So the book was very powerful for me. If you can see us, if you're watching us out there, this is what it looks like. Go get it. I did it. Audio version.
So here's the point of where we're going with these rising demands, right? All of us can relate to this, but what do we do with it? Well, most of us go to the one resource that we're most familiar with, right? That's most intuitive, which is
physical energy, time,
right? Yeah. So when the demand goes up, we just work longer,
put more effort into it,
and we all know how to do that, and it's intuitive to us to draw on this resource time. But time is not our only resource, right? It's the one that we're most familiar with. The problem is that time is finite, and so eventually you run out of it. And once it's gone, it's gone. You can't renew time. You can't get it back, right? Once the hour's gone, it's gone, no matter how you spend it. So what this book posits, and this is what the whole book is about, is instead of going to time as your resource of choice, you really have to figure out how to manage your energy. Because energy, unlike time, is expandable. You can systematically grow energy, and you can regularly and infinitely renew energy, which is amazing.
Right.
And so this book really makes some bold promises that I'm starting to discover are actually true, which is that as this demand goes up, you can actually not just keep up, but actually even exceed, grow faster your energy. So instead of having to work 18, 20-hour days, you can actually work less but produce more and enjoy a better quality of life, have time for family and friends and other things and causes that are important to you if you manage your energy. So central tenet of the book is managing energy, not time, is the key concept to engage fully and produce
and have high performance. So I think for me, Tim, like you said, it's actually pretty intuitive that we know that, but I don't think the average person knows how to practice that and how to get that done.
So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, and that's what they did their studies on.
This will be a really valuable podcast.
I really think that for a lot of us, it is a good, like you mentioned, 4 times reading this book in the last decade or so, it's a good thing for us to re-look at in our ever-changing and increasing demands of our businesses and lives. So it is something that is always good to check back on and go, well, how am I doing now? Because, we have added a new child in the last 6 months. We have added a new opportunity. You and I have added a new opportunity, and honestly, over the course of this 1 year, when it was germinating from you around Christmas time this past year in 21, we have not managed the energy well, at least the way we thought we could. And it's because we have other demands, not because we couldn't have figured it out. It's like we didn't know where to put the energy, and we didn't do it at the right places at the right time. So, very, very interesting thought process that I went through here. Now, I will say about the book, Tim, as I was mentioning to you just a moment ago, that the practical applications are not in here. Now, we're going to give some, but they're not in here. They do give case studies on real folks because they have an entire clinic and a process that they do for high earners and learners and achievers mostly in the corporate world. But I think there's a lot of things that we have to pull into our own system and really assess on a personal level. we're doing it.
The book is long on theory, I would say.
Yeah.
Which for somebody like me, I like. I like to understand why these things work and why they're important. And it does a great job of explaining the need for this and really even the legitimate science behind it, the science, the psychology, the whys behind it. But you're right, it does leave a little bit to be desired in like, okay, what do I do with this?
Yes.
But it gives some hints, and I think
it does
from
give hints.
our experience,
Yes.
I think we can flesh that out today.
Yeah, so one of the things that it made me think about actually pretty quickly is these two scientists and clinical research and authors, they talked about recognizing a pattern that took them a while to uncover when it came to physical athletics.
Yeah.
So we all have seen, and it's a part of our Western world, to have high performance achievers on television doing their thing in their athletic fields. And what they were starting to discover inside the area of professional tennis players was that there was a difference between the best and then amongst the best of the best. So
they were working with really great tennis players.
Yes,
like
already.
world class.
Yes, already ranked tennis
players. But they
players.
were really good,
Yeah.
and then they were like the best.
The best.
And there was a difference there.
Yeah, and there was a
that they
difference, but
discovered.
it took them a while to figure out what it was. They
That's
could
right.
not figure out what it was that helped the best stay on top.
Yeah.
And hours of practice was not the differentiator.
Right.
You know, the way they held their racket, they weren't finding any differentials that between those things that were really noticeable, that were making the best and amongst the best the differentiating point. What they started to realize was what the best did during breaks.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that right there, I'm throwing it out there early for everybody. Taking breaks actually had to do with the whole system of being the best.
Yeah.
How they managed energy, so taking breaks is managing energy, was really the differentiating factors. And what they discovered was that the folks who did the best, performed the best, the highest, had very routine, systematic things that they did every single time to limit the energy they needed to produce outside of their actual performance moment, and second, to get their mind off of what they needed to do at that time. And which you wouldn't, that's not intuitive.
Think. No, you wouldn't think. They talk about it as a recovery ritual. So it was interesting to me, one of the points they make in this book is how everything about life is actually cyclical. Your breathing is a rhythm. Your heart is rhythmic. The way your cells work, the circadian rhythm by which you decide when to wake up and go to sleep, like all of these things are rhythmic. And yet we tend to live our lives like a machine, linearly, right? We get up, we go to work, we produce, and that's not how life works. That's how machines work, but that's not how people work. And so their argument is that everything about life is a rhythm. And just like we know from physical exercise, if you go and work out, you're not supposed to work the same muscle groups every day, right? You work them, and you actually, if you exert yourself, you're creating little microscopic tears in your muscle fiber. But then on your recovery day, what happens?
They build back up.
They build back
replenish.
stronger than they were
renew.
before,
Yes.
right? They come back, and that's actually where the growth happens, and that's how you get stronger. Well, it's the same way in anything, mental, spiritual, physical, emotional. You have to have this cycle of exertion, stress we could call it, and recovery.
Right.
And that's what they were talking about with these tennis players is between points, they would go through all these silly little rituals that seemed silly, but actually were brilliant. Like one of them tapped both heels with their racket and took a sweatband and wiped their forehead, and they would take some sawdust out of their pocket. It was these little rituals that actually were rhythmically, not rhythmically, but systematically and intentionally lowering their heart rate.
Mm-hmm.
Like they could hook them up to a heart monitor, and the really good tennis player over here that didn't have the ritual, their heartbeat stayed elevated. This one over here that had this little 10-second ritual actually could lower their heart rate, which is incredibly valuable as it turns out.
Right. It reminded me of, now, Tim, I don't know if you saw the King Richard movie over the course of this year.
You know by now that if you ask me about a movie, the answer is probably going to be no.
Well,
right?
I'm here to make sure that all of our pop culture listeners out there get their They get satisfied by something that it reminded me of. So this year, Will Smith won the Best Actor Oscar for his portrayal of Richard Williams, Serena and Venus's dad, right? King Richard was the film. And a great film. I'd highly suggest it. And it reminded me specifically of this scene. When these two guys, Laura and Schwartz, mentioned tennis, I said, wait a minute, there was a scene in that film where Venus, the older sister, is performing in some sort of junior type tournament, one of her first biggest opportunities. And maybe she's 14 or 15. And she is beating the number 1 ranked tennis player in the first match or something. I think it's match 1 she took. So Venus is up. And it's, I guess, best of 3 or something. So my knowledge of tennis is not high, everybody. So help me and correct me out there in the comments and troll me if need be. What
between
happened.
Tennis and pop culture, we've
okay,
got the
right, yes, we
here.
shouldn't be talking about these things, but it was a good movie. And this particular scene toward the end of the film, what happened was the other player was more advanced on her routines than Venus was. She'd been in the scenario and situation before. She knew she should be winning, and then she knew how to win, but it wasn't a physical game she started playing. She calls a timeout. And she stops the flow that Venus is going through and puts her on ice. So anybody who's watched other sports know how this can be effective, especially in basketball. I'm a basketball fan. And if the other team's on a run, you'd never have a player from the team on the run call a timeout. Slow things down. Keep the momentum going. But the other tennis player, the other tennis professional, even at a junior type age, 14, 15, 16, she stopped, called a timeout, and left the court. Went to the bathroom or whatever, and there's nothing you can do about that. Tennis is a game where you don't get to be coached. The coaches sit up in the stands with everyone else, so you're down there playing with yourself and against the other person. She ices Venus Williams and leaves the court. And apparently it took about 10 minutes or something. And all you have to do is say that you need a bathroom break. So she leaves, and Venus didn't know how to handle that, apparently. Now, I'm watching it and wouldn't know any different. But apparently Venus didn't either. And so whatever happens during the recovery period of that 10 minutes, Venus did not know how to handle that. And the other tennis professional did. And she came back and took the next set of games. And there was nothing Venus could do about it, even though and you're thinking, what happened? Because it wasn't a physical challenge that she was going through. She needed to recompose herself, and all that type of stuff. And Venus, apparently, according to the research that you'd see in a book like this, is she kept herself at a level she couldn't sustain. But the other person recovered. And obviously, got a few demons out of her head and got back to what she knew she could do.
Recovery, this cycle of exertion and recovery, I think, is hugely undervalued. And one means of recovery, by the way, is sleep. And most of us don't get it, either enough sleep or good enough quality sleep, which is another discussion for another day. But I think the cycle that you're talking about with Venus and her opponent, there's a chart in this book, in the copy that I've got, at least, it's on page 10, and it's called The Dynamics of Energy, and maybe we can put it up if you're watching on video, maybe we could put it up. But basically it's a quadrant, right? Four boxes. And at the top you have high energy, the bottom you have low energy.
Got it. High
energy,
on top,
low energy.
Low on the bottom.
Okay, over as I'm thinking about our viewers, right? Over here on the left, you have negative energy.
Okay.
Over here on the right, you have high energy.
Okay.
I'm sorry,
positive.
not high, positive. Yeah, negative to positive, low to high, right? And so if you ask people, hey, think back to a time when you were last really productive. You were really in flow. You were getting things done. It was a great day. What kinds of emotions were you experiencing? What kinds of thoughts were you thinking? What kinds of feelings were you feeling, right? Well, you're going to come up with things like, I was confident, I was connected, I was aligned, I was engaged, I was energetic. You have all these high energy feelings and experiences, and positive. High positive, right?
Yeah.
That's the performance zone.
Right.
Okay?
Which
Positive,
is easy
high
for
energy.
us, right?
It
We all
makes sense.
understand this.
It
See,
makes
that's
sense.
why this is, pieces of this are so...
Makes sense.
Yeah, it just makes simple sense.
All right, but then think about the still high energy but negative. Now I'm fearful, I'm anxious, I'm defensive, I'm stressed out,
Right.
I'm angry maybe, I'm irritable. And most of us oscillate between those two.
Okay. Out of the four quadrants, we're just going back and forth between these two. Okay.
So positive to negative, but still high energy.
Yeah.
Because like we've got to perform, we've got to get that, we've got to meet that deadline at work. We've got to close this sale, we've got to hire this employee, whatever it is.
Things always demand our full attention.
Yeah.
But our attention might be positive or negative about it. Yeah.
And we're stressed out, and that leads to burnout and whatever, but we oscillate between those two. But what this book says is what we actually need to do is oscillate up and down, where it's positive, but it's between high and low. Because you can't always live in the performance zone. You just can't stay there. If by default you're going to fall out, you're either going to go negative or you're going to go low. If you're not intentional, you're going to go negative. If you are intentional, you're going to go low. This is the recovery period. And it's not like I'm 50-50, right? I might spend most of my time in the performance zone, but just like those 10-second breaks between points in tennis, I've got to figure out how to be really intentional about getting a fast recovery. So when you're in this low positive state, you're relaxed, you're mellow, you're peaceful, you're tranquil, you're serene, you're experiencing joy, and most of us feel guilty about living in that zone, right? So I feel like, man, I'm in my car on the way home, and maybe I could listen to music, or I could pray, or I could relax and just let my mind wander, but man, I'm too busy for this. I've got to make the most of everything, so I'm going to make that phone call to a prospect, or I'm going to call a client and coach him through something. I'm going to make use of every minute. Or at a minimum, I'm going to listen to a podcast, or I'm going to listen to an audiobook. And what happens is I never get to that low energy state. And according to these guys, and I'm starting to experience it, I'm really robbing myself of that valuable recovery period. So oscillating between high and low energy on the positive side is much better than staying high energy but oscillating between positive and negative.
I think that's a really good point that the book makes, and hopefully you're able to visualize that, ladies and gentlemen. So we want to stay in a positive energy state, and simply put, we want to always feel good.
Yeah.
If we feel good, we can perform good, we can think clearly, but you can't always be in a high energy performance zone. You've got to take it back for a second. So it's very important to think about. Here's my question that I have for you, Tim. Is there a way for us to figure all this out before we get to the place where we were like, well, I was doing very poorly at this, and that's why I now figured this out? You know, is there any way for a person who's not yet at full capacity, maybe younger than us, maybe less kids than us, maybe only one business and not 10 of them, can we figure this out early in life, or do we have to wait until there's some sort of crash?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a great question. I don't know that I can speak from experience, but I do think that being intentional about your periods of exertion and recovery, if you get that right early, I think you'd be way ahead. Yeah. And there are all kinds of components to that, but so let's try to make this practical. Like, what have you discovered? So, and I don't know if you just read the book recently, but think back in your experience, what kinds of things have you done to intentionally recover? Yeah.
Well, I think this brings us into the four elements that you mentioned a little bit earlier that they talk about: the mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual energy zones. Yeah. First off, it's discovering that if you're not working inside, if the things that you're doing are not aligned with your what they would call spiritual energy zone, then you're going to be frustrated anyway, because you're not going to feel that your work you're doing is profitable, or you should be
meaningful,
or
is worth anything, right?
So number one, I think many folks out there who would listen to us are doing things that they feel they want to be doing because it's who they are. It's a part of their value system, I guess you could say. So let's assume that. But I think there's been many, many times where all of us have been in business associations, partnerships, or we took on or said yes to an opportunity that was not aligned with our values. And maybe it wasn't even our fault. We just didn't realize it wouldn't be. And because of that, drains energy, immediately goes to negative, and you're at that zone of frustration and anger and things like that. So number one is just staying inside your value zone. So for me, that's a big thing. And how I figure out what my values are, what my practical test is, as you mentioned, is come home every day. And when there is a new opportunity, tell it to my wife. She will remind me, nope, that ain't you. So that's one of them. Listen to your wife. So she's got that intuition like that, nope, that one's going to kill you.
So let's back up for a minute and give those four categories so we keep everybody organized, right? So physical energy, the four sources of energy, right, for us. Physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual.
Yes.
So these guys say that physical is the most fundamental source of energy. You've got to get that right. If you don't have good diet and exercise and sleep, that is the fundamental source of energy that makes everything else possible. But your spiritual energy is the most powerful source of energy. It's the most significant. So those are kind of the bookends that keep everything else in check. So we got to make sure that we've got good physical energy as a foundation. The most powerful source of energy is spiritual, and certainly I think we could all agree on this, regardless of your faith practice. Spiritual energy is the idea of connecting to a purpose greater than ourselves. It can't just be about making money or getting rich and famous, right? That's going to be empty for sure. And that's what you're talking about with making sure that what you're doing is in line with our values. I don't think you mean, like, when you say in line with our values, some people are like, well, what's he doing? Is he doing like unethical things that are not? No, it's not. It's just that there are some things that are serving a purpose greater than ourselves, and there are other things that are like, oh, this could make me a lot of money.
Right, and just serving a purpose, but it's not greater than ourselves. So, or it's, and of course, like Tim is saying, it's not an ethical or unethical type of value system that I'm trying to go back and forth between here, because there is alignment on someone else's value that's greater than themselves. Right. But it's just not mine. Yours. Yeah. It's just not mine.
So for me, when I think of spiritual energy, if I can call it that way, and doing things, I want to do things that matter for eternity, right? Not just for time. I want to do things that are going to advance the kingdom of God. But at a minimum, I want it to be something that is not just a temporal, oh, this is going to make me rich or famous or achieve this actually meaningless goal. And you said earlier, let's just take it for granted. I don't know that we should take that for granted, because I think a lot of us are on a treadmill and we're like chasing other people's dreams, or we're doing what is expected of us, or somehow we've been handed this vision of what the American dream means for us or whatever, and it maybe is not aligned with actually who you really are or who we really want to be. So I do think that it's worth some reflection.
It is.
Is what I'm doing right now actually in line with the purpose for which I was made?
Right. And I think because we're all given talents, and we all have specified some of those talents through practice into actual skills, we can go back to those points with reflection and some time. So that moves me from the wife test to the mom test.
Okay.
See, mom it has a great value system, but her skills and her talents don't align with mine in the same way. So mom is always going to be an encourager and say, yeah, that's a great thing that you're up to. But mom isn't going to participate. See, they're good things, but mom's like, well, I'm not going to do it, though. That's for you to go do. And so I have a problem oscillating sometimes between being caught up into other people's vision and wanting to help. And those things can take away from my physical and spiritual, like you said, the bookends, spiritual and the physical energy, because I'm running out of time and the physical energy I need to put in that. I'm like, well, these are good things, so I think I should be involved with them. And that's what I mean by spiritual and good forces and values, but they're just not my things. They're just not my things.
So let's talk about the physical for a little bit. Let's go ahead and take your assumption.
Okay, here we go.
Take it for granted. How can we recover physically? So the book in one of the appendices actually has this great list, so I'm just going to read it to you. I know you're not supposed to read on air, but oh well, we're going to do it.
We can do it.
So, most important physical energy management strategies. They've got 10 of them. And as I told you I've read this book 4 times. Apparently I'm a slow learner, because as I read this, even this morning, this particular page.
No. See, we change and grow, and so you're not the same person that read it previously.
That's true.
There you go.
But I read this just this morning, this page, in preparation for recording this podcast, and I realized that of these 10 most important strategies that they list, I'm basically failing at 9 of them. Here we go.
Okay.
Number 1, go to bed early and wake up early.
We all know this. I mean, we all know it.
We do know this. Now, I know that some people, and I'm sure I'm in this group, I am naturally more of a night owl, and I get more done at night.
See, I'm not. That one's easy for me.
This is not easy for me, but
because I fall asleep without even trying. Like, I wake up at my desk at 10 p.m. It's like, I've been asleep for an hour and a half on accident.
All right, number 2, go to sleep and wake up consistently at the same times. That's another miss for me.
But I feel like we all know that too. Maybe we don't. But
we do know that. I know this, but I'm telling you,
no matter what, the alarm gets set at the same time. No matter when I went to bed, you go to bed when you're tired, as early as possible, but when you're tired, and wake up at the same time.
Yeah, everybody says that you should do that, and somehow I think, yeah, but I'm different. I mean, I don't really consciously think that, but I think, man, I've got to store up sleep on the weekends because I know I'm going to have a couple short nights this week. So maybe I'll sleep in on Saturday morning, which I almost always do. It's bad, Tim. Bad, Tim. Stop it. All right, I'm going to fix that. Okay. So seriously, that's one of several.
0 for 2 on physicals.
Yeah, it's going to get worse from here. This is interesting. Eat 5 to 6 small meals daily. So the idea is that you want a consistent source of energy throughout the day. I definitely don't do that.
So for my friends who are in the fitness industry, several friends and family members who are bodybuilders and things like that, food is fuel.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so which I hate, but if food is fuel, then you're only doing it to let your body perform on a certain level, not because it tastes good.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
All right, number 4, eat breakfast every day. Yeah, that's another miss for me. Like if I have a breakfast meeting, and granted, a lot of times I have a breakfast meeting, then I'll eat breakfast. If I don't have a breakfast meeting, man, I got too
also,
much work
what are
to
you
do to
eating
have
for breakfast? Because I'm a stickler about some of those things.
Oh yeah, tell me about your breakfast.
Well, I think you know that for me, it's typically going to be a fruit and vegetable smoothie in the morning, and so there's other book reviews we'll have to do on future podcasts about some of those theories and science behind those types of things. But it's normally not a hearty breakfast you want either.
Yeah,
it's normally something that gives you the energy, lets you break the fast, but it's not hearty, so your body and blood has to slow down to process all the food. That's another reason why you'd have small meals.
Yep, right. All of this is areas for improvement for me. I've got good genes apparently. I'm in pretty good shape.
Yeah.
I'm in my ideal target range for weight.
Right.
Like a lot of good things, but that's not, frankly, because I've been super disciplined in these areas. I just, kind of won the gene lottery, I guess. So, all right. Eat breakfast every day, not doing that consistently, and probably when I do, I often am not eating sometimes I am, but not always eating the right kind of breakfast. Number 5, eat a balanced, healthy diet. Yeah, that's so. I've gotten better at that, but I'm certainly not most people would look at me and say, oh yeah, he eats really well.
Well, according to cereal commercials of the 90s, I'm probably fine. 45 vitamins and minerals, whatever that means, right? Your bowl of Honey Nut Cheerios, and there was like a banana and an apple off in the corner. But yeah, like who knows what that really means? Food pyramid people.
All right, 6, minimize simple sugars. Yeah, probably not very intentional about that. Number 7 is actually an area where I succeed. Drink 48 to 64 ounces of water daily. So I learned a long time ago that I do a lot better when I drink a lot of water. So between meals, at meals, all day long, I start. So my goal is every morning before I have any coffee. I don't have coffee every day, but I do most days. I'll always drink. I've got this big water bottle. I don't actually know how many, 20 ounces or something. And I'll drink a full bottle of water before I do anything else.
Okay.
So, and then throughout
before
the day,
you leave the house, or before you even.
Oftentimes, I'll put it in. I'll grab it on my way out the door, and I'll drink it on the way to work.
Okay, very good.
Yeah. So, and then throughout the day, I'm drinking water, and I almost never order soda or iced tea or whatever. I'll usually drink water. So, and I definitely get my 64 ounces of
very
water
good.
almost every day.
Very good.
So that's
we'll
one.
If I had a sound effect for a clap, there's one of them over here. I don't know how to do it. I don't
remember which button it is. All right. 8, take breaks every 90 minutes during work. That one I've started to do. I'm not consistent at it. Actually, I got this fancy little Aura ring that tells me periodically, time to stretch your legs. Like if it knows that I'm sedentary, it says, hey, get up and walk around. So I'm getting better at that one.
Now, along the lines with 90-minute flow and then breaks, do you feel that you're able to consistently get 90 minutes of kind of uninterrupted good work in?
I'm getting a lot better at that.
Okay, see, and I'd be failing there before the break part. I've got to work 90 minutes consistently.
So we could do another podcast sometime on flow and deep work. Cal Newport's work on that is really valuable. But so I think it was these guys. I don't remember. This might be a different book. But the average corporate employee in America, the white-collar worker, performs tasks 11 minutes at a time. Basically, the average length that they stay on task doing one thing is 11 minutes.
11 minutes.
Which seems bad enough. Like, man, you can't get anything done in 11 minutes. But get this. They're interrupted, I think, every 2.5 minutes.
Wow.
So even though I theoretically am doing the same thing for 11 minutes, my focus gets stolen every 2.5 minutes. Well, shoot, you can't get into any kind of deep work or even shallow work in 2.5 minutes. That's terrible.
Right.
So you've got to figure out ways to minimize distraction. So I use do not disturb and focus modes on my phone a lot. I'll set it so,
I like
of course,
that.
right now we're in a podcast,
Right.
but my phone is set to do not disturb for the next hour. So it's not going to buzz or beep. And I would do the same thing even if I weren't recording. If I were sitting down to work on something important, I'm going to look. There are very few things that can't wait an hour. We feel like we've got to respond to every text and every email and every Slack message and every notification that comes in. There are very, very, very few things that can't wait an hour. Like if the building is on fire, I'm going to hear the fire alarm and leave. And if, my home is on fire, my wife can call somebody else at the office and get my attention. There's a way that somebody's going to get through to me, but deep work is important. So anyway, the whole point here is, yes, staying focused for those 90 minutes, but then take a break. Don't try to stay focused longer than 90 minutes because it's just not going to work, right? Okay. Take breaks every 90 minutes. Number 9, get some physical activity daily.
I feel like you're pretty good at this. Yes? No?
No. I play racquetball, but not every day.
Okay.
And other than that, I'll do simple things like I'll take the stairs instead of the elevator. I will park at the outside of the parking lot instead of right up by the door so that I run or walk into a store.
He does not do that in this building, ladies and
That's
gentlemen.
true. I don't at this building.
Yes,
well, the parking lot's kind of small.
Well, I was going to give it to you, and then you said, no, I'm not going to. I don't actually exercise every day. And I'm like, he doesn't park far away at this building.
Yeah, right. No, that's true. That's because I'm always coming in with 60 seconds before the light goes on, right?
Okay.
Something like that. So anyway, get some physical activity daily. I'm better at that than some, but I'm not working out every day.
Gotcha.
So that's another area I got to fix. And then do at least 2 cardiovascular interval workouts and 2 strength training workouts during a week. Absolutely not. I don't do that 2 of each kind every week. There's no way. So I got a lot of stuff to work on here. But that brings me to another point that they talk about in this book, which is what if I said, oh yeah, I'm going to fix 5 of these things. That's my New Year's resolution. This podcast, we're recording it in late December, but it's going to come out in January. A lot of people are doing New Year's resolutions. What if I said, I'm going to do these 5 things starting January 1.
And you got some caution flags about that.
Big time.
Okay.
Big time. Right.
Let's hear 'em.
You can tell me what's going to happen if I say I'm going to work out 4 times a week at the gym.
We all know.
What's going to happen?
The only thing that's full in January is the gym, right?
Yeah,
and then in May, June, July, we've lost all those great people.
Yeah,
What happened
I don't even
to
think
them?
they last till June, May, June, July most of the time. So the problem is that willpower and discipline are in much smaller quantities than most of us assume.
We can run out of the very finite.
You might say you're a really and I think I am. I think I'm a really self-disciplined person. I've got a lot more willpower than most people. But it's still in shorter supply than I would like to admit. And if I say I'm going to do these 3 things and all of them require willpower, it's just not going to happen. It's just not. So there are 2 strategies that I think there's a ton of good stuff in here, a lot of good takeaways. I think these 2 takeaways are valuable for anybody listening today. So how do you build good habits? Well, number 1, you've got to be really specific, right? So they talk about these studies. I love studies. I love being able to prove a theory. So they talked about a couple of studies where, for example, they went on a college campus and they took 100 people or whatever the number was, and they said, hey, did you know that working out regularly can significantly reduce your risk of cardiovascular problems? And they ticked off all these health benefits and basically educated them on why working out was important. And regular participation at the gym in this group went up from 29% to 39%. So education had to move the needle 10%. Cool.
Of course.
Okay. But then they took another group. They gave them the same message, but they said, so what would be a good time and place for you to work out? And among the group that actually identified, well, I could work out at 6 a.m. on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, it went, I could look it up, I think it went to 91%.
Wow.
So way more, and they've got a whole bunch of studies like that. They ask another group to write a report on how they would spend Christmas Eve. And they said it's due Friday at you've got until Friday at 5 p.m. I believe, if I remember right, 33%, I'm pretty sure it was a third of the people actually brought the report by Friday and said, here's how I'm going to spend Christmas Eve. This is not a passing grade, folks. 33%, not so good.
Right.
But they ask a different group, same question, write this report on Christmas Eve, it's due Friday by 5, and just write here in this form, when and where are you going to write this report? Well, I'm going to go to the library, or I'm going to go to my office, or I'm going to go to my whatever, and I'm going to do it, Thursday at 2 p.m. That group, 75% of them turned it in.
Look at that.
So being specific. So this is a big takeaway for me, and I've experienced this over the past few years. If I tell somebody I'm going to do something, but I don't commit to a time and place, it's probably not going to get done. I have every intention. Let's say that we're talking about another book that we're going to do on here, and I say, yeah, I'm going to have that book read by next week. If I don't actually put it on my calendar and say this is when and where I'm going to read it, I hate to say it, but chances are not all that great that I'm going to read it.
Right.
So I've actually several years ago started using my calendar like a to-do list, and I use a little tilde, a little squiggly line to say it's not like a meeting with this book, and it can be moved. But my plan is next Thursday at 10 a.m. I'm going to read 5 chapters of this book. And next Thursday at 10 a.m., chances are pretty good that I'm going to pick up this book and read 5 chapters or whatever I said I was going to do. But if I don't do that, it's not going to happen. So be specific about the time and place. So if I say I want to commit to these better health goals, better health practices, which I do, number one, I've got to plan it specifically and actually put it on my calendar. But number two is I can't do all of them at once because I don't have enough willpower.
Right.
Nobody does. So
but
what
if we
I need
use
to
them
do,
as stepping stones, we can grow into them over time.
So I need to step it out and plan it. All right, for example, if I haven't been working out at all, and I have, so I'm not going to start here, but for example, if you've spent the last 6 months without any physical activity, and then you say, I'm going to work out 5 days a week, yeah, right. You're not going to do it. You're going to last for 2 weeks. So what you need to do is say, I'm going to walk 15 minutes a day, 3 days a week. And I'm going to do it at 7 a.m. in this neighborhood or whatever, right? But then you say after 21 days of this, I'm going to go up to 5 days a week. And then after 21 days of that, I'm going to add in a gym the other 2 days or whatever. You step into it, you're actually very likely to succeed as long as you can you make achievable goals that are stretching you, but not too much and not too many things. But if you say, yeah, I'm going to eat better and I'm going to drink more water and I'm going to have regular cardiovascular exercise and I'm going to get better sleep and I'm going to eat 3 meals a day, it's just not going to happen.
Right. For me, what I'm taking away from this one specifically and the physical is make a commitment to do something today. That's it. So I have a tendency to do that pretty well. Make a commitment for today and not worry about the long-term, look, I need to do all of these. Yep. It's what can I do tomorrow? And that's kind of what you're saying. Get specific about what you can start on. Yep. And if you do that, then you can grow into whatever else will come. And when we become the person who can be consistent to ourselves, have that integrity, then it's easier for us to commit and feel good about committing to the next step. Because if we have a series of failures over and over and over, we've all met those folks, and we've all been those folks from time to time. When we consider consistently see ourselves fail, that does something to our psyche that just blows all this away. It
reinforces this stupid idea that, well, I knew
we're
it wasn't
not good
work.
enough.
Yeah,
we
exactly.
can't do that, or that's not what I should be focusing on. Right. And we throw them out because you're not going to be able to become the person you need to become and you want to become if you leave out one of these areas as well, right?
Yep.
If you leave out your physical energy, you're not giving it the time and the space that it needs for full engagement, you're not going to be able to pull off all the other ones because eventually your health won't be there and you won't have the physical energy to do so.
Yeah, you got it.
All right, so I want to hear a little bit more about this mental and this emotional area as well. So in the mental area of focus, I think we can kind of go back to this athletics model is learning to take breaks is really what this one's about. Physical, we actually normally, our corporate athlete out there, not our physical fitness athlete, is going hard at work.
Right.
But we're not actually mentally disengaging on purpose for renewal.
Right.
So what would you say to that?
And most of my life has been that way, even in my quote-unquote breaks. Like, I'm going to take a walking meeting instead of sitting in a conference room. I'm going to grab whoever it is that I'm supposed to be meeting with and like, hey, let's for a long time I had an office right on this great trail. It's a 13-mile trail that's in our area, and I think 13 miles, whatever the Swamp Rabbit is.
It's getting bigger and bigger all the time.
Something like that.
Too.
And we would go walk on it, or now I've got an office that's real close to a nice little park that has a walking trail, and so we'll go and have our meeting there. But that's not a mental break because I'm still working really hard as I'm walking. It's better than sitting in a conference room, but I haven't taken a mental break. Or, I'll go and have a coffee meeting, or I told you earlier, I'm driving home and I'm on the phone. I used to take very, very few mental breaks. Still don't take enough. But a mental break would be like, hey, get up and walk down a couple flights of stairs and listen to a song that you really love. And the song might only be 2.5 minutes long. And then you come back and get right back to work. But that mental break where you're not actually thinking about work is really valuable.
It really is. I think there are a lot of ways that you can even implement this type of idea in your culture with your team. Yesterday specifically, and earlier this week in our office, there was a new game we introduced to ourselves. And we played it we must have played it for about 45 minutes, longer than we needed to yesterday. But there were 4 of us in the office who decided to take a mental break from work. Was not physical, right? We were still here. We still actually had to use our computers. And it was a game where we're trying to find stuff via Wikipedia. And we played it against each other to see who could do it the fastest. But the morale went up. We talked and laughed for a few minutes. And it was a mental shift that all of us were able to take a break and renew some energy for the rest of the afternoon.
Yeah. I think it's important to be intentional about the kind of breaks that we take, because some of us take breaks only out of desperation, like we're burnt out. We are like, I cannot work any longer. And so then we like escape. We try to distract ourselves with, maybe it's a game on our phone.
Right.
Maybe it's, I don't know, for weirdos like me, it's like, oh, I'm going to go see how my stocks are doing and do a little day trading or whatever. But you got to make sure that it's actually a break that is rejuvenating you.
Yes.
And maybe those things are. And I think what you did was. But
it wouldn't always be, because we were still at our desks. We were still on the computer. So I completely agree.
My point is that you've got to be intentional. Just because it's a break doesn't necessarily mean it's rejuvenation.
Yes.
So think about, and like binge watching Netflix at the end of the day because you're too tired to do anything else. Maybe that's a break and maybe not. Maybe that's just a distraction, but you're actually not feeling rejuvenated at the end. It would be much better to go take a walk in nature and just let your mind wander.
So that actually brings us and ties us in pretty well to the emotional category, because they quantified that one as the quality of the break.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how they do that. They say that the physical energy is the quantity of energy that you have available. Emotional energy is the quality, right? It's focused on quality. Help me out.
And then mental is the focus.
Mental is focus. So the focus of your energy, I think that's a really big idea. And then spiritual is
the force.
The force
behind
energy.
it.
Yeah, the force of energy.
So, I mean, so powerful. And that's why they all work together, right? Because I think it was easy for us to tie into that mental break, but realizing that the emotional, the quality of that mental break also needed to be there as well. And you mentioned, for instance, the difference between having that break that we took in the office on the computer wasn't physical and probably wasn't disengaging enough, right? So
and maybe it was for you,
of course, but we wouldn't do it regularly as like, this is what we do every single day. And we go harder at the computer trying to race ourselves around Wikipedia.
By the way, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to know what that game was, I don't know, is this your own invention?
No, I'd heard of it before, but my brother recently played it, and so he works in the office as well. So I don't remember what it's called. I think it does have a name. It's a universal thing, because we can all get to Wikipedia.
So we played it for less than 10 minutes the other day when I was here at the beginning of an executive board meeting, right? And the game worked like this. You ask 2 people for 2 random topics. So I think I said economics, and Will said Mr. Rogers. It's hard to get more different than that. We didn't know at least I didn't know what the game was when I picked that, right? So we had economics and Mr. Rogers. So then everybody at this table started on Wikipedia looking at the article about economics. And the idea was, without using your keyboard and without using the back button, we had to get from the Wikipedia page on economics to the Wikipedia page on Mr. Rogers.
So we're only clicking hyperlinks just
inside
blue
Wikipedia.
links.
So
all we're doing is
clicking
somehow
all of this. Get there
until you land on the Mr. Rogers page.
And I think Jonah got there in it was like 6 or 7 minutes.
My brother killed us on he killed us on every category except one yesterday as well. So.
Anyway, that's the game. All right.
So The question that I have as we get into the application of this, once again, and we've been applying this throughout the entire podcast, so hopefully you've taken a lot of things home, is the question that I've asked myself is, what can you do to rapidly and effectively keep performing at the top? Because that's really the goal. The goal isn't the break. The goal is full engagement on what you are doing and to be able to perform at your highest levels. And really, it's being intentional about when and how you slow down.
Yeah.
That's actually what you can do. And so you've got to be at your physical and spiritual and emotional and mental best so often, and that is part of who you are and what you're trying to do in a high performance zone. You've got to learn how to turn it off.
Yeah.
Is really what it's all about.
So this is not only the 90-second music break or walking up 2 flights of stairs or whatever, but it's also like taking a vacation.
Yeah, oh yeah.
How many of us take vacations and aren't vacations because we're glued to our phone or our laptop? You see these guys sitting on the beach with their laptop. I'm like, dude, you just stay home. What's the point?
I don't know. And see, I don't know, because that for me was like, I feel like maybe I could do it that way. Well, if I at least get outside and go somewhere or whatever. I mean, there's still. How are we gonna get our Ubers and get to dinner if we don't have our phones still? Yeah. I don't know. So that's just me. But
so Strategic Coach, an organization I talk about a lot, has a whole system for this. They call it the entrepreneurial time system. Basically, you got 3 types of days, but one of the days is a free day, and they define a free day as a day completely devoid of work. You're not checking your email, you're not checking your voicemail, you're not calling the office to check in, you're not reading business books, you're not thinking about the business. You are completely 24-hour period from midnight to midnight. You are off. And for most entrepreneurs and people listening to this show are like, yeah, that's crazy. Right?
right.
But there's a whole community, thousands of entrepreneurs that are part of Strategic Coach that have actually learned how to do this, and they wouldn't trade it for anything. I'm telling you, it's a powerful concept. And it's the same idea. It's like you've got to rejuvenate so that you can come back and be more productive, more creative. You can solve problems better, faster, cheaper. You can get more stuff done in less time.
We all believe in the rest day when it comes to getting the gym.
Yeah.
So
I guess otherwise.
Why not otherwise?
So taking actual breaks, both short and long breaks, is part of it. And anybody that says, "Oh, I'm too busy. I've got too much work to do. I don't have time for a vacation," that's wrong. It's actually, if you're so busy that you don't have time for a vacation, that means absolutely you need to take a vacation post haste, because you're going to come back and get twice the amount of work done.
Right. You're structured in a poor way. Or of course, it can be a limited time period where hey, I have to go and be in flow, right? Yeah. A word that we've brought up a little bit longer, but you got to know that doesn't last forever, and it shouldn't last forever, and you're looking forward to a time where you can recover and reassess what's going on.
JDew, we've got a bunch more we could talk about, but we're coming up on an hour, which I don't think we've ever gone over an hour on one of these shows, so we should probably wrap it up. The Power of Full Engagement, Jim Lair, Tony Schwartz. I recommend it to you. You can get it on Audible. You can get it on Amazon, paperback, hardback, however you like to consume information. But the key idea here is managing energy is more important than managing time. Both are important, but managing energy is the key to unlocking full engagement, high performance, and it's just really powerful stuff. So big takeaways are, you've got to have periods of exertion and recovery in all 4 areas: emotional, spiritual, physical, and mental. And you've got to be intentional and systematic about it. You've got to plan for it. So they talk a lot, we didn't really get into rituals, but they talk about how important it is to have a ritual, like a particular time and place and habit. Rituals are powerful because you don't have to expend energy to do them. Right? If I'm creating a new habit to go to the gym, it takes a lot of energy. But if I just go to the gym every morning and it's just my habit, it's actually, I'm pulled there instead of me having to push myself there.
There we go.
Right?
I like that.
So rituals are really valuable, but you've got to be intentional about creating those rituals of recovery and exertion. And if you do that, you get into this beautiful rhythm. You get into this beautiful rhythm that mirrors how life is supposed to work for us, instead of being this machine that just performs and performs until you drop dead, right? So powerful engagement, powerful stuff. Any closing words for our listening audience?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, in the new year, we hope that you have a full engaged year where you're able to perform at a high level and function at your best, and you've got to learn how to disengage to do that well. So
absolutely,
we wish you the best, and we hope you stay here with us as we review more ideas and topics to help those high-performing entrepreneurs get to exactly where they're going. with the least amount of bumps on the road. Thank you for joining us here at Grow with Tim. Check us out online in lots of different places, and comment. Let us know what we can help you out with on your entrepreneurial journey next.
Thanks for listening to today's Grow with Tim podcast. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to show us some love by following us here and on our other social media platforms. You'll find all the links at growwithtim.com.